Welcome back to the deep dive. Usually we are here tearing apart the latest tech trends or looking at the history of the supply chain.
Right, or trying to figure out why everyone you know is suddenly obsessed with stoicism.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But today we are doing something a little different. We are tackling a text that is arguably the most recited piece of literature in the history of the human species.
And that is not an exaggeration. We are talking billions of times, every single day.
Right. We are looking at Surah Al-Fatiha, which is the opening chapter of the Quran. It's just 7 short verses. And if you are a Muslim, this is the heartbeat of your day. You recite it at least 17 times.
Yeah, and if you aren't, you have probably still heard it chanted or maybe seen it in calligraphy somewhere.
Right. But, and here's the hook that really grabbed me when I was going through our stack of research for today, we are going to look at it through a lens that claims almost everyone has been reading it wrong for about 1,000 years.
Which is it's a bold claim to make.
It's a massive claim. We are working with a series of lecture transcripts titled The Parwez Dars. And I want to be clear right off the bat with you listening at home. This isn't a sermon.
No, definitely not.
This is not a guide on how to pray better. This is a radical linguistic and honestly a philosophical deconstruction of these verses.
Yeah.
The source argues that humanity has taken a revolutionary social constitution and basically turned it into a set of empty rituals.
Exactly. The central tension of this whole deep dive, and really the central tension of the source material itself, is this absolute distinction between two concepts, mazhab and deen.
Right, mazhab versus deen. We really need to nail this down because everything else flows from it.
So the source argues that mazhab, which we usually translate into English as religion, is actually a later invention.
A human invention.
Yeah. Mazhab is about private rituals. It's about priests and temples and holy men. It's about pleasing a deity to avoid getting zapped by lightning.
Or just trying to secure a good spot in the afterlife.
Right. It is static. It's about saving your individual soul. Basically, you just keep your head down, do the chant, and get your ticket to heaven.
But the source argues the Quran didn't come to establish a mazhab. It came to establish a deen.
And deen does not mean religion. It means a system.
A system.
A collective social, political, and economic structure. It is a comprehensive system of governance and human development.
So the argument is that these 7 verses Al-Fatiha aren't just a prayer you mumble under your breath. They are actually the preface or the constitution for a universal evolutionary system of governance.
A constitution for a universal state. He literally calls it the preface to the Quranic constitution. Just like the preamble to the U.S. Constitution sets the stage. You know, we the people, in order to form a more perfect union, Al-Fatih sets the stage for the entire system that follows it.
And the tool he uses to prove this isn't theology, it's etymology. That is what I found so fascinating about these transcripts.
Yeah, he goes right back to the roots.
Right? He doesn't just say, I feel like it means this. He goes back to the ancient Arabic roots, the raw language of the desert Arabs, before the terminology got fossilized by centuries of organized religion.
And that is where the aha moments really start piling up for the reader. Because when you strip away those medieval layers and look at what the words meant to the Bedouins who first heard them, the text completely changes.
It goes from a prayer for personal salvation into a manifesto for human evolution.
It really does.
So let's dive right in. Verse 1, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. The standard translation everyone knows is, Praise be to God, the Lord of the worlds. It sounds majestic, right?
I'm very standard.
But our source stops us dead at the word Lord. He says Lord is a terrible, misleading translation for the Arabic word Rab. Why is that?
Because Lord carries very specific, very feudal baggage, especially in English and in the structure of European history. A lord is an owner.
A master.
Exactly. He owns the land, he owns the serfs, he owns the produce. His relationship to you is purely one of dominance.
Right, like I own you, so you serve me.
It implies a power dynamic of ownership and subservience. But the source argues that the Arabic root RBB rad has almost nothing to do with ruling or ownership in that feudal sense.
So if a Rab isn't a feudal landlord, what is it?
The source defines rububiyat, which is the quality of being a rab, as nourishing and sustaining a thing from its point of origin to its point of completion gradually.
Nourishing until completion. That feels much more organic.
It is entirely organic. The source uses the analogy of a potter with clay. I think this visual really helps you picture it. A landlord owns the land, but he stays up in his castle. He doesn't touch the dirt.
He just collects the taxes.
Exactly. But a potter gets his hands dirty. He takes a lump of raw clay, basically dead matter, and he actively works on it.
He spins it, he adds water, he applies pressure.
Right. He has a vision in his mind of what that clay can become, a beautiful vase or a sturdy bowl, and he facilitates the evolution of that clay. He takes it from potential to actual. That process of facilitating growth, of taking something from a raw state to a finished state, that is rububiyyat.
So God isn't the owner of the universe in a static, unmoving sense. He is the evolver of the universe.
He is the force that ensures everything grows and reaches its absolute potential. And this is where the source drops a massive bombshell.
Yeah, this part blew my mind.
He connects this definition directly to scientific evolutionary theory. He claims the Quran actually described the process of evolution 1,400 years before Darwin did.
I read that section and I had to pause. He explicitly talks about the biological stages of life.
He traces the Quranic description of life starting from dead inorganic matter, then mixing with water to become clay or slime, then moving to a single cell. He literally calls it a life cell that is invisible to the naked eye.
Which is wild, because obviously they didn't have microscopes in 7th century Arabia.
No, they didn't. And he argues that this microscopic cell contained the potential for the full human being. He rejects the standard religious mythology entirely here.
He is very blunt about it.
He says, show me in the text where it says Eve was created from Adam's rib.
Yeah, he just dismisses that as biblical folklore that crept into the tradition.
He says it is simply not there. He argues the text purely supports a biological lineage, from dust to water to a single cellular origin evolving steadily upwards. He is adamant that the system is based on evolutionary biology, not magical proof creationism.
But he breaks this creation down into two distinct stages, which I think is a crucial distinction for you listening to wrap your head around this system. Amar and Khalq.
This is the metaphysics behind the physics. Amar implies command or direction. Think of it as the blueprint phase. Before an architect builds a skyscraper, where does the building exist?
It exists in his head
Yeah.
or on a computer screen. It's just data.
Exactly. It is a concept. It is a set of mathematical rules and boundaries and proportions. That is the world of Amar. It is the design directive. Then comes Khalq.
And Khalq means creation or manufacture right.
Yes. This is when you bring the steel and the concrete and you actually build a thing according to the blueprint.
So Rab is the one who designs the blueprint, the Amr, and then nourishes the physical material, the Khalq, to match that blueprint.
Precisely. And here is where it gets really personal for us humans. The source argues that for animals, this process is mostly automatic. A cat is a cat. A spider just inherently knows how to weave a web. Their creation is physically complete. But for humans, we are unfinished.
We are a work in progress.
Our bodies might be finished biological machines, but the personality, the ego, the consciousness is still very much in the Khalq phase. It is still being shaped.
And he says this current physical life is just the preface.
Yes. He actually quotes the philosopher Iqbal here. He says that the current life is just the introduction to the book of life. The physical body is a machine that will eventually stop. It returns to the dust, but the self continues.
If it's developed enough.
Right. And the purpose of rububiyyah, the purpose of this entire system, is to develop yourself so strongly that it actually survives the death of the biological body.
So we aren't just trying to get into a heaven with gardens and rivers as a reward for good behavior. We're trying to evolve our consciousness to survive a universal transition.
It completely shifts the goal from salvation to achievement. You aren't being saved from anything. You are evolving. You have to solidify yourself so it doesn't just dissipate when the biological containment unit shuts down.
That is a wildly different take than just be good and get a cookie. It's be good and build a soul.
Exactly. You are building a skyscraper, not just washing the windows.
Which is a perfect segue to the next verse. If the goal is evolution, how does the system actually support that? Verse 2, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, usually translated as the most gracious, the most merciful. But again, our source takes out the red pen and crosses out mercy.
He really dislikes the word mercy in the Western Christian context. He argues that in the West, mercy implies pity.
Pity, like, oh, you poor thing.
Or more specifically, judicial pity. It implies you are a criminal. You are standing before a judge, you are guilty, and you were begging, please, judge, don't punish me, let me off the hook.
I throw myself on the mercy of the court.
Right, and if the judge shows mercy, he suspends the law. He says, okay, even though you did the crime, I won't make you do the time. The source argues that is mathematically impossible in the Quranic worldview because of the law of retribution. cause and effect.
Like Newton's third law.
Exactly. If you put your hand in the fire, it burns. That is the law. God doesn't forgive the burn in the sense of making it magically never happen. The law is absolute. If you drink poison, you get sick. No amount of emotional mercy changes the chemical reaction.
So if there is no pity and the law is absolute, what do Rahman and Rahim actually mean?
He goes back to the root word RHM Ram, which literally means the mother's womb.
The womb. That is a radically different image than a grumpy judge in a courtroom.
It changes everything. Think about what a womb actually does. Does the womb judge the fetus? Does it check if the fetus is worthy of food?
No, it just feeds it unconditionally.
It provides protection. It provides nourishment. It is elastic. It expands as the fetus grows. And most importantly, as the source points out with a bit of humor, it is entirely free. The mother doesn't send an invoice to the fetus for 9 months of room and board.
Here is your bill for calcium and oxygen. Please pay up.
Exactly. It is gratuitous provision. So Rahman and Rahim aren't about forgiving sins. They are about providing the tools and resources for growth. The source uses the analogy of a medical ointment.
I really like this one. It makes the abstract concept very practical.
So going back to the fire, you put your hand on the fire. The law of justice says it burns. That is immutable. But the mercy, or rahmat, is that the universe contains an ointment that can cure the burn.
So it doesn't negate the law. The fire still burned you, but it provides a mechanism for recovery.
It's a repair kit built into the system. It allows you to fix the damage and keep growing. It's not about emotional forgiveness. It is about the availability of resources to correct your course.
But why two separate words,
Yeah.
Rahman and Rahim? They come from the exact same root.
Yeah.
Why do we need both?
This is one of the more technical parts of the lecture transcripts, but it is fascinating if you like systems theory. The source distinguishes them based on the pace and the nature of the evolution.
Linear versus emergent evolution, right?
Yes. Rahim follows the Arabic linguistic pattern of fa'il, which implies something constant, gradual, and step-by-step. This is standard linear evolution. A seed becomes a sapling, then a tree, then it bears fruit. It's linear. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Slow and steady growth. The daily grind of getting better.
Exactly. But Rahman follows the pattern of Falan, which implies an explosion, a sudden outburst, a boil-over. The source connects us directly to the scientific concept of emergent evolution.
Emergent evolution, that's when a system suddenly gains a totally new property that its parts didn't have before, right?
Yes, like when life suddenly emerged from dead matter. You can study atoms and carbon forever and never find life, but you put them together in a certain complexity and boom, life emerges. Or when consciousness suddenly emerged from animals. That isn't a slow step-by-step thing. It's a quantum leap.
It's a system upgrade.
That explosive grant of resources, that massive unearned upgrade, that is Ramaniyat. It's gratuitous. You didn't earn life. You were just dust, and then suddenly you were alive. That's Raman.
So God is Rahim in the day-to-day gradual growth, but he is Rahman when he provides these massive game-changing leaps in evolution.
Precisely. And he links this to Revelation itself. You can learn math step by step, which is Rahim, but prophethood, the sudden download of universal knowledge that is Rahman. It's a sudden gift, not a ladder you climbed.
It really paints a picture of a universe that is incredibly dynamic. It's moving, growing, leaping forward. It isn't a static courtroom where we are all just sitting on benches waiting for a verdict.
Which brings us to the human response. If the universe is this dynamic system of growth and God is the evolver providing the tools, what are we supposed to do? Verse 4, Yaka Nabudu, usually translated as you alone we worship.
And here comes the wrecking ball. The source says worship is entirely the wrong word.
He rejects it completely. He says worship belongs to mazhab, to religion. It evokes images of lighting candles, chanting, bowing down to please a deity so he doesn't get angry and ruin your crops. That is the old world. That is mythology.
So what does ibadah actually mean if it's not worship?
The root is ABD. Yes, it means slavery or subservience. But the source digs into the ancient Bedouin usage of the word. They use the term tabid for taming a wild horse.
Taming. That implies raw, unbridled energy.
Think about it. When you tame a wild horse, do you break its spirit? Do you want it to be weak and pathetic?
No, a weak horse is useless to you. You want it to be strong. You want it to be fast, but you want that strength channeled. You want it to follow the rider's command safely.
Exactly. Ibadah isn't about humiliating yourself or being weak. It is about taming your own rebellious instincts, your raw ego, your chaotic desires, and channeling that incredible energy to follow the constitution of God. It is total subservience to the law.
He calls it a constitutional government of the universe.
He does. He argues that in this system, this Deen, God, is not a dictator acting on whims. He is the ultimate source of the rule of law. And he makes a very sharp political point here, too.
Right.
He argues that sovereignty belongs only to God.
Which honestly sounds like a standard religious line at first.
Right.
But he spins it into a deep critique of human politics. Now, just as a reminder for you listening, we are exploring the arguments made in the text without taking sides on the political theory here. We're just unpacking his framework.
Right. So he argues that if humans make the fundamental core laws, whether it's a king, a dictator, or even a shifting democratic majority, you inevitably get instability.
Because human laws change based on who happens to be in power today.
Today it's legal, tomorrow it's illegal. Today the tax is 10%, tomorrow it's 50%. The source argues that for a human society to be truly stable, the core principles must be non-changeable, la tabdila. You need an objective standard that no human can tamper with.
So the Deen offers permanent security because the core constitution doesn't change every 4 years.
Exactly. And in that system, rituals, things like daily prayer or fasting, aren't the ultimate goal. They are training exercises.
I love the soldier analogy he used here. It's so visually striking.
It is brilliant. He says, look at a soldier in the army. He wakes up early, he polishes his boots, he marches in formation, he salutes. Why? Is polishing boots the actual goal of the army?
No. If the enemy attacks you, don't throw your shiny polished boots at them.
The goal is to win the battle. The polishing and the marching are just discipline. It's training to get him ready for the battle. They create a cohesive unit that knows how to follow orders under pressure.
But the source says look at Muslims today.
He says they are like a soldier who lives in a tiny village where there is no army, no general, and absolutely no war. But every single morning he wakes up, puts on a uniform, grabs a stick because he doesn't have a rifle, and marches up and down the street.
And he thinks he's achieving something great.
He thinks he is a soldier, but he is just performing empty motions. The source argues that performing rituals without the system of governance, without the actual social implementation of these divine laws, is meaningless. You are polishing boots for a war that isn't happening.
And there's a scathing critique of modern religious practice. He's basically saying people are just playing dress up if they aren't actually implementing a social system of justice.
It challenges the listener to ask, are you serving the system or are you just performing the rites? Because ibadah is the implementation of the law, not just the chanting of the law.
So if we are taming ourselves to follow this system, where are we actually going? The next verse is a request. Idina as Surah Al-Mustaqim. Guide us to the straight path.
And again, the definitions really matter here. Hidayah, which translates to guidance, isn't just a vague, warm feeling in your heart. It's not an intuition. The source points out that in the desert, Hidayah implies a clear raised landmark, like a rock formation or a fire burning on a mountaintop.
Something you can clearly see from miles away, like a lighthouse.
Yes. And he draws a very sharp distinction here between instinct and choice. He says animals have hidayah built into their biology. A duckling just knows how to swim. A spider knows how to weave a web. That is their instinct. They are pre-programmed.
The humans don't have that.
The source argues humans have no fixed nature or fitra. This is a very controversial point because many people say Islam is the religion of human nature. He says no. Humans are born a blank slate.
And he uses the wolf boy example to prove it.
Right. The famous case of the feral child raised by wolves in India. The source asks, when they found this boy, did he speak a language? Did he walk upright on 2 legs? Did he have any human values?
No, he ran on all 4s. He barked. He ate raw meat off the ground.
Exactly. That proves that without societal input or divine input, we are functionally just animals. We have the potential to be human, but we aren't born with the software pre-installed.
So Hidayah is the software we have to actively choose to download.
We have to choose our guidance. We have to look at the landmark and choose to walk towards it. Animals are pushed by blind instinct, but humans must be pulled by a conscious vision.
And that landmark points to the straight path. Surah Mustaqim. Why specifically straight?
Mustaqim comes from the root qiyam, meaning to stand tall or to be balanced, so it is the balanced path. But the real kick here is what he contrasts it with. He uses this verse to attack the philosophical idea of cyclic time.
This is the heavily anti-mysticism part of the text.
Right. In Greek philosophy and Hinduism, and even in a lot of Sufi mysticism, there is this idea of the cycle. You come from God, you get dirty in the material world, and the ultimate goal is to clean yourself off and merge back into God. It's a circle. You end up exactly where you started.
The source mocks this with the laundry analogy.
He says, is life just a cosmic laundry service? You send a clean shirt representing the soul into the world where it gets stained with dirt. Then you wash it in the laundry of hell or spiritual purification and you get it back white again. What was the point? You just wasted time and soap.
If you just end up back at square one, the whole journey was completely pointless.
Exactly. The source argues the Quranic view is strictly linear, not cyclic. It is about achievement falah. You don't go back, you go forward. You are building a self that literally didn't exist before. You are not merging back into God. You are becoming a distinct, highly developed individual capable of higher stages of life.
That is incredibly empowering. It means everything we do here actually adds something new to the universe. We aren't just cleaning up a mess.
We are building that skyscraper, not just washing the windows.
But there are pitfalls, obviously. The path isn't easy. The surah ends by defining the path negatively. The path of those you have graced, not of those who are angered Mugdub or who are lost Allen.
This is where he gets into heavy political and social critique. He corrects the translation first, though. It's not, don't show us the path of the angered. It is show us the path of the graced, who are by definition not the angered or the lost. It's a defining characteristic of the successful group.
So who exactly are the Mugdub or the angered?
Well, first we have to establish that God doesn't throw emotional tantrums. Anger here refers to the law of consequences, the grip of the law. When a nation violates the fundamental laws of nature or sociology, they get gripped. That is the wrath.
What are the symptoms of a nation that is under this wrath?
Stagnation is a big one. He calls it maskanat. It's when a nation completely stops thinking. They stop moving forward. They rely heavily on ancestor worship, saying, well, our fathers did it this way, so we will too.
We have always done it this way, which is probably the most dangerous phrase in any language.
Absolutely. The source says that when a nation becomes intellectually static, they are Magdub. But he also links it explicitly to economics. He says God's wrath manifests as societal collapse when wealth is hoarded.
Hoarding wealth literally brings the wrath.
Yes. Think of the human body. If blood stops circulating in pools in one place, you get a clot. You get a heart attack. When wealth stops circulating and pools only in the hands of the rich, the society gets a heart attack. That collapse is the anger.
He also mentions cowardice as a symptom of wrath.
He uses the historical battle of Badr. He says turning your back on a challenge or fleeing from a necessary struggle brings wrath. But then he drops a massive historical bombshell.
I was waiting for this part. The internal conflict argument. And again, for you listening, we're just reporting the source's claims here because they touch on some very sensitive historical nerves.
It is very sensitive. The source argues that a believer intentionally killing a believer is the ultimate sign of being angered. The text explicitly says if a believer kills a believer intentionally, his punishment is hell and God's wrath.
And he applies this strictly to early Islamic history.
He looks at the civil wars that happened shortly after the Prophet where his companions fought each other, massive battles like Jamal and Siffin, thousands of Muslims killing other Muslims.
Standard Orthodox history says these were tragic political disagreements or mistakes, but that both sides were still fundamentally good, pious people.
The source refuses to accept that compromise. He says, look, the text is clear. Wrath is upon those who kill believers. He suggests that the history books telling us that these great companions slaughtered each other must be a conspiracy or a later fabrication. He completely rejects the recorded history to save the Quranic principle. He refuses to believe the graced people, the Nimat, could become the angered people, the Magdub, overnight.
That is a radical take. He's basically saying if the history contradicts the principle, throw out the history.
It shows his absolute commitment to the text as the ultimate standard. He believes the system implemented by the Prophet was so robust and perfect that it couldn't have devolved into bloody civil war that fast unless the narrative we have been fed is entirely false.
Okay, so that's the angered. What about the lost, the Dallin?
The lost are the confused. The source uses this great metaphor of milk and water.
Mixing truth and falsehood together.
Right. If you mix water into milk, it still looks like milk, but it isn't pure anymore. It has lost its nutritional value. The lost are those who mix divine law with human innovations and traditions until you can't tell them apart.
And this leads to what he calls the sheep mentality.
Blind following. He says these people have hearts but don't feel, they have eyes but don't see. They just follow the crowd blindly. And this leads to his critique of modern democracy, which, again, we are neutrally examining here.
Right, the 51% rule.
He is highly critical of the idea that truth is just a numbers game. He says if 51% of people vote to drink poison, it doesn't magically make the poison nutritious. It just means 51% of people are going to die.
So The loss can actually be a majority.
Absolutely. In fact, he says the majority is often lost because they follow their desires or their fleeting emotions, which he calls shaitan or Satan, rather than following the objective law.
Wait, let's pause on that. He calls human emotions shaitan.
Yes. He demystifies Satan completely. He says Satan isn't a red monster with a pitchfork sitting on your shoulder. Satan is the rebellious human emotion that refuses to bow to the law. It's that voice inside you that says, I know the rule, I know what is right, but I want to do what I want. That internal emotional rebellion is the lost path.
So bringing it all together, we have the Rab, the evolver, the Rahman, the provider of tools, the Ibadah, the taming of the self.
Yeah.
And the path that actively avoids stagnation, which is wrath and confusion, which is lost. What is the end game here? What does this system look like when it's actually working?
He calls it Nizam-e-Rabubiyat, the system of providence.
A state that is fully responsible for growth.
Yes. The main takeaway here is that the purpose of the state, the purpose of the deen, is to take absolute responsibility for the physical and mental growth of every single citizen.
From the cradle to the grave.
Universalism is key here. Rab al-Alamin means Lord of all worlds, not just Lord of Muslims or Arabs or a specific tribe. The system must provide for everyone universally.
And he viciously attacks the religious defense of poverty.
This is his strongest economic point by far. He says religious leaders often tell the poor God made you poor as a test, so be patient. You will get your reward in heaven. The source calls this the lost thinking. It is using God to justify a broken, exploitative system.
Don't blame the hoarding, blame God's will.
Exactly. The source argues that poverty is proof that the human system is broken, not that God wills people to starve. The grace, the ni'mat, are those who have abundance. But, and this is crucial, they circulate it. They create balance or mizan. The angered are those who hoard and break that balance.
So the system of providence is basically a comprehensive economic and social framework where the state ensures no one is left behind, allowing everyone free time and resources to develop their self.
Precisely. You cannot evolve yourself if you are starving to death. You cannot focus on the Amr at the higher design directive if your calc basic physical needs are completely crushed. The state handles the body, so the individual has the freedom to handle the soul.
That is a massive vision. It turns a prayer that takes 20 seconds to recite into a complete blueprint for a utopia.
A blueprint for a constitutional government of the universe.
So what does this all mean for us listening today? We have unpacked a lot of dense material.
I think the biggest shift is this. We usually think of faith as something static. You believe, you pray, you wait around for heaven. The source is telling us that faith is dynamic. It is a process of active, relentless evolution.
It's about movement.
It is entirely about movement. Sirat Mustaqim is a road, not a parking lot. If you are standing still, intellectually, spiritually, economically, you are under wrath. If you are just blindly following the crowd, you are lost. The only way to be graced is to be moving, building, and evolving.
And realizing that worship isn't about the ritual itself. It's about the discipline to stay on that road.
The soldier polishing his boots so he is ready to actually fight when the time comes.
It really makes you rethink those 7 verses. It's not just a ritualistic mumble. It's a pledge of allegiance to a universal system of growth.
A pledge to evolve.
I want to leave you listening with this final thought. If the purpose of life, as this source argues, is achievement and evolution, rather than just waiting for salvation, how does that change your Monday morning? If you aren't just trying to keep your shirt clean, but you are actually trying to build a skyscraper out of your consciousness, does that change how you work, how you vote, how you treat your neighbor?
It certainly raises the stakes. You aren't just passing time, you are constructing eternity.
A heavy thought to end on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the evolutionary philosophy of Surah Al-Fatiha.
A pleasure to explore it.
We will see you next time. Keep evolving.